Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you're listening to the show for the first time, you can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify and Audio Boom. We're across a range of different audio platforms. We're, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We're on Facebook and Instagram too. And yes, apologies, we are running late. But as you guys know by now, Spurs do their business late. So we're just following by trend here on the Last Word on Spurs, of course. And we have got a very, very special guest joining us. You thought January was done. How wrong were you? How wrong were you in terms of what we had lined up? Right. Let's go round and then we will introduce our special guest, of course. I've got alongside me the runner, the instructor of our Conte crazy train, Lee McQueen's in the house. Lee, how are you? Lovely to have you here.
Absolutely loving it. I think this is even my third show this week or something like that, isn't it, Rick? And it's only, what is it, we're only on Wednesday. So absolutely delighted to be here and having the main man on. Like, it's going to be gold standard tonight.
I love it. Fantastic. Lee McQueen loves a catchphrase, as you'll know by now, of course. Lee McQueen loving a catchphrase. Also pleased to have back on one's a wonderful podcast over, of course, of our youth. We've got the great John Wenham over at Lilywhite Rose. John, how are you? Lovely to have you here for this one.
Ricky, listeners, hi, how you all doing? Yeah, doing really well. The transfer window only shut yesterday, and we've got another day of breaking Tottenham Hotspur news. So loads to get into tonight. Really looking forward to it. Great panel. And Alasdair, welcome back to the show.
Listen, looking forward to having him here. I mean, you couldn't make this up. I promise you, this is not purposely done as well, by the way. I mean, you couldn't make timing up. We love this timing. Ali doesn't know we love this timing, but we do love this timing. Also, please have back on the show. We've got the wonderful Jamie Brown over at Daily Hotspur. Jay, how are you? Lovely to have you here.
I'm very good, thank you, Ricky. And yeah, good evening to all the listeners and all the other guys on the show. Yeah, fantastic show lined up tonight. Obviously, lots of excitement for it. So, yeah, really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Now, I'm pleased to have one of the busiest men I know, not just in football, but Tottenham Hotspur specific. From YouTube to the Golden Guest podcast to any Tottenham Hotspur related content you find on football.london. From, of course, listen, we have gone gold. We have saved what we think the best till last. We've got the wonderful Alasdair Gold from Football London. Ali, lovely to have you here. Thank you for making the time for us.
No worries at all. Absolute pleasure. Always really enjoy doing these. Yeah, we've got so much to talk about, haven't we?
We have indeed. Yeah, I'm conscious of time, but my wife's in the room, so I've got to be careful about what I say in terms of time limit. And bearing in mind, as the listeners will know, the amount of shows we've done so far over the course of the last month, thankfully the divorce hasn't been served just yet, but the way it's going, I might be after hitching at the moment. So we'll see where this evening takes us because, Ali, listen, where to start? I mean, listen, we couldn't make time enough in terms of bringing you on. It wasn't done deliberately, but I've got to say, this has worked out to be purely gold, to say the least. We have seen Spurs today release a statement that confirms that Steve Hitchen, our director of football, has left the club. The statement read, "We can confirm the technical performance director, Steve Hitchen, has left the club. Steve was a scout at the club from 2005 to 2010 before returning in 2017. We thank him for his work over the years and wish him well for the future." Reports have indicated, Ali, that Steve, towards the end of his tenure, had little involvement in the transfer window in the summer and then again in January, and was more focused in terms of overseeing departments such as sports science and the medical department. I'm just interested to know what your first thoughts are, and are you shocked, surprised by, Steve Hitchen's departure today?
No, not really. Not surprised by it. Not surprised that it came on a day off for me either. It's just a classic. It's been coming. It's, if the kind of information we got way back last summer that was Paratici came in and it was kind of without his knowledge, to be honest, and he's come into a bigger role, that is essentially took on a lot of the main elements of what Hitchen's job were, but obviously a much bigger title, more of a kind of almost like managing director of football, I guess, is the clues in the title. So, I think it's been coming. Like you say, that's exactly what we've kind of been told, that his role has shrunk and it's been more based maybe more in the sports science side of things, academy things, and not so much in terms of first team transfers anymore. It's an interesting one. Obviously, you guys all have seen social media. Social media has been, let's put it this way, social media and Steve Hitchen probably don't go well together, especially since the Amazon documentary where, the poor bloke, he had that one line that essentially has been ripped out of what I think was a bit of a monologue where he was discussing how difficult the January transfer window is. And it became this thing of just, I hate it. And we see that with everything. It's stuck up and, I'm not gonna jump on the pile on Steve Hitchin. You know, I think he's a guy that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's anywhere near as bad as people are making out. You don't stay 10 years at a football club, kind of have the ear of all the managers really like him over the years. You don't get courted by Everton and Newcastle when you're leaving the club if you're some kind of clown, as social media would make out. I think there's been the odd transfer misstep that's maybe been more to do with him. Like, I understand Serge Aurier was someone that's, for example, that I think he pushed for the signing of. Although, with hindsight, you could maybe say Serge Aurier would probably be the best right back at Spurs right now had he been here. But then the flip side is he's a guy whose job really has been about getting the right players for managers, the players that the managers have asked for. And there's been other players that, you know, he's been told go out and do a deal for. He's done those deals, and then they haven't been greenlit by the club, Daniel Levy, the hierarchy, whoever. So, yeah, I think it's all a little bit overblown, the criticism he gets. And I don't think those people are probably ever going to change their minds, and that's absolutely fine. You know, we all have our opinions on stuff. But like I say, I think the fact that two clubs who have probably got, well, certainly Newcastle got a lot of money to spend, and they've been putting that trust in him to spend that if he goes there. And Everton, who, other than messing themselves up a bit with financial fair play, would ordinarily, I think, have a little bit of money to spend as well. So he's clearly someone that's trusted. But yeah, and today, you know, I think it was yesterday, I think he informed the club that he wanted to go as well. So that's it. It's someone that's been there for 10 years, a link to the previous eras, the Poch era and all of that. And it's going to be a very different Tottenham, I think.
Indeed. Well, I'm going to hand over to Lee McQueen.
Yeah, Ali, you mentioned Everton and Newcastle there, and it's actually really interesting. It's also been reported at different times, as you've just alluded to, that Steve Hitchin negotiated deals for the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Paulo Dybala, Jack Grealish even, and, you know, maybe for different circumstances, maybe it is the hierarchy, maybe it was Daniel Levy that have backed out and deals over potentially financial issues. I think it was well documented, wasn't it? Jack Grealish was all but done and saying goodbye to his Villa fans, and that was a bit of a U-turn. Is that something that you've heard of, like within the club as well? Is that your kind of understanding that actually, you know, there is always some balance, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on social media? And I'll be honest with you, I've looked at Tottenham's recruitment process over the last, 5, 6, 8 years, and I think from the outsider looking in, I think it's a mess personally. But actually, when you look at it, when you read the names out, there's some stellar names there, isn't there, that didn't get over the line? Is that how you view it?
Yeah, there's certainly. I mean, every club's the same, isn't it? There's deals you'll go for, you'll get into an advanced stage, and it doesn't happen. And certainly that seems to be the case with Hitchin. That he was tasked with going out there negotiating with clubs during his time as he didn't. I don't think his title was ever sporting director, as it were. I think he was essentially became it, kind of almost with Paul Mitchell's departure. And there was certainly a string of deals that he was involved in getting to the final stages, and Tottenham just decided not to. We were talking about this off air, that the 2019 is a really good window to look at, because I think that's the one that people probably do look at and associate Steve Hitchin as the last, big window where maybe Spurs spent a fair bit of money. But when you actually kind of extract the various elements of that transfer window, which at the time we were all pretty excited about a lot of the stuff that happened, and obviously with hindsight, none of them have really worked so far. Hopefully Ryan Sessegnon goes on to be something, but otherwise, they haven't. But you look at that, Tanguy Ndombele, Poch wanted him so much. That was so driven by Poch. He saw him as the absolute perfect kind of midfield addition, the Dembele heir, as it were. Just didn't work. They went out and they got him. He was actually one of those rare occasions. We're all so cynical. We always think whenever there's a big deal, and it's been proved again this summer, we always expect Spurs are going to get picked at the last minute. They actually got Ndombele, and that was Hitchin kind of setting that up, and then obviously Levy would have kind of driven it home with Jean-Michel Aulas, who's essentially like the French Daniel Levy, just who likes to talk a bit more. So there's him. There was Giovanni Lo Celso. I think he was one they arrived at a bit later on, having missed out for Bruno, and I think it was Dybala as well that summer, wasn't it? And then they kind of, I think they were ahhing over certain people, and I think Poch pushed through for Gio. He kind of was his. Well, if we can't get the others, he's the one I want. So that's those. And then Jack Clark, it's been kind of very well documented as more was a club decision, more a Daniel Levy kind of thing. You know, I think the recommendation, I think it was David Pleat on Jack Clark, if I'm right. I could be completely wrong. I've got a feeling there was David Pleat was looking at him and Jared Bowen, I think, at the time, and the club decided. Obviously, with hindsight again, clearly the wrong move. But one was, I guess, one was 10 million, one was 20 million, you know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So David Pleat's got a good record himself of scouting good players. I don't think we can absolutely slam him with that one. And then Ryan Sessegnon, who was a player that everyone wanted. So, yeah, and Spurs got him over the last thing. Liverpool and Man U were all really looking at him. So it's one of those where, in hindsight, we're going to absolutely slam Steve Hitchen with that summer window. But at the time, he was kind of doing what he was told. It's an awkward. It's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, I think, a lot of the time. And I think if we look at the predecessors before him, you know, you look at the Mitchells, the Baldinis, the Comerleys, and all of that, and Arneson kind of at the start of it all, and they don't hang around. It's a difficult job. They all essentially head off into the sunset. I think he's the one that probably lasted the longest. I think he did 5 years-ish in the role, which is longer than any of those other people. So, yeah, Tottenham Hotspur. I don't think it's the easiest place to work. I get that impression quite a lot. Let's
go to John, then we'll go to Jamie on Steve Hitchen. Over to you, John.
Yeah, Ali, I mean, I just want to play a bit of devil's advocate here. We did this a little bit off air, but I just wanted to, you know, I think personally Tottenham's recruitment has been woeful for a significant period of time. I think back to Sonny being the last really good signing that was made, and he came straight into the team. Other than that, we're always buying players that are second choices or nobody else wants, or it doesn't seem like other people are in for. And I feel like because Hitchen oversaw that for such a long period of time, he should have taken maybe more of the blame than that. And I was quite surprised he kept his job for as long as he did, especially with Fabio Paratici coming in. And it maybe feels like with Fabio coming in the summer, he was always only going to stay on for these 6 months for a kind of transition period and then move aside, because Tottenham had made their decision in the summer that, look, Steve Hitchen or somebody's got to take the rap for these poor signings. They have been disappointing and significant sums of money have been spent. And I feel like that was always going to happen. I mean, is that unfair at all?
To a degree, I guess if you're putting yourself in that position, and like I say, his title wasn't head of recruitment, but essentially, yes, that was his remit. Could he have been stronger? Maybe. Could he have kind of put his foot down and said, you know, I don't know, Poch, this player isn't really suited to this league. I've scouted him. I don't know if it will work. Or could he have said to Daniel Levy, you know, you've really got to push this through because this person's a game changer? Maybe. But, you know, I was about to say, you know, you guys know Poch and Daniel Levy. None of us really probably ultimately do. But the sense that we all get from them is that they're strong characters. And I suppose it's the same with Conte now and Paratici. We'd want whoever Conte wants to come in. We'd want him to be backed. We'd want those players he chooses to be backed to come in. So, yeah, it's a tough one with him. I definitely think mistakes will have been made on his part. Of course there will. Like I say, Sergio Aurier is a good example of a player who he pushed for and didn't really come up with the goods. But, I don't know, it's slightly harsh. I mean, we see Paratici now if we're going to be really brutal, has the apart from Romero, has the recruitment got any better? I agree with you 100%, by the way. I do think there's been so few big wins in terms of recruitment. I do agree with that 100%. I just wonder whether that's a collective blame rather than a single person's fault. That's probably my take on it.
Just another question on Hitchen. Do you think there might be any sort of feeling from Hitchen or maybe that sense that Levy might have stopped, because obviously we've seen a lot of the reports on Twitter of some of the players that Hitchen tried to chase. Do you think there might have been a sense that maybe Levy kind of stopped Hitchen from bringing in some of these top players? Obviously, Tielemans been linked with him, Dybala. Jack Grealish. Do you think there might have been a sense that maybe Levy kind of limited the job that he did at Spurs, and maybe he might go to Everton or Newcastle and get that free reign of being able to bring in players? Do you think there might be a sense that Levy kind of held him back a bit?
Well, yeah, I think there's a ceiling at Tottenham. I think there always is, and it's something we all find so frustrating. There's a certain limit to where they'll go with transfers in terms of a fee, in terms of sometimes wages. And yeah, I think Daniel Levy is the man that says yes or no at the end of the day, really. So yeah, I guess so. I guess there's been moments, hearing Lee bring up the name Jack Grealish earlier, just absolutely, it's still. I know there's this meme goes out at me where I did this in a video once. I love a screen photo or something, or a painting. But that is honestly, as soon as I think of Jack Grealish, it just makes me want to do that, because Spurs had that so in the bag. It was so done. It was everything advanced player wanted to come. He was even going to come on less money, I understand, than he was on Villa. That's how much it was done. And Spurs just had to put in that. I think it was 24 million. That was the figure to get him. But they messed about. They waited around. Players saying goodbye to the fans, and shock horror. New money comes into Villa, and we've seen even those investors now are still piling in the money into Villa as well. Yeah. And Jack Grealish, was it 2 years later, £100 million player? It's just like, yeah. So in answer to your question, Jamie, I think that's probably the best example of that button not being pushed and holding Spurs back, I think.
Yeah. Ricky, just on that last question, the last comment that came up on the screen about 1-4. I mean, what a fantastic job he did in unveiling Giovanni Lo Celso. I mean, if my acting skills were as good as his in the way he unveiled him, then maybe I've got a career in acting. So.
Possibly, mate. We'll line that one up for you later on. Everyone's got an acting career for Jamie. Give him a shout. There's a possibility. Right, Ali, we've only been going for 15 minutes. There's over 1,000 people plus watching us live. Again, I must say thank you so much for all the incredible support.
Hit the like button, Rick. You know what I'm going to say? Hit the like button.
Not with Ali Gold. We're not doing this with Ali Gold on here. We are not doing that with Ali Gold on here. Listen to me. I must just say, though, we've had an overwhelming, I think, month as a podcast with just the response we've had from people. And I must apologise myself because I've had, again, hundreds of DMs from people that I will get back to you once I've had some sleep. Because the chances are I get them on a night shift tonight, and then it's with the baby at 1 a.m, 2 a.m. You don't want to see me like that, and I'll be able to reply back to everybody when I've got a sense of normality about my life, which hopefully is coming towards an end. But then we've got all these rearranged games to come, so I'm really looking forward to that. And God, what time we've got in store? So I'm not going to complain. We've had commenting from Craig Silver. Craig says, if the summer is truly the big one, who would be a realistic marquee signing? Ali will ask you that one quickly. Any names shoot out to you? Bearing in mind you've done the last month or so telling us about so many different names.
Well, they still need to fix those two areas they didn't fix. It's the right wing back and the striker, really. They're the two that absolutely scream at you. I mean, my hope, as it was last month, was that they bring in an actual natural right wing back. It wasn't rocket science. As much as I know a lot of people are excited about Adama Traore, anyone that ever read or listened to my stuff knows I was just like, he's not a wing back. It's just like, I don't get it.
I'm with you on this one, Ali.
Yeah, buy a wing back. This is not to say they will go for this player, but for me, the obvious screaming out person is someone like Tariq Lamptey. It's like, he is the kind of guy that, can you imagine him in that Conte line? Oh my goodness, he'd be incredible. I would love for them to, rather than putting towards, as excited as I was about the prospect of it, 50 million plus whatever for Luis Diaz, I actually think getting that kind of money and trying to get Tariq Lamptey to Spurs would be such a big piece of the jigsaw. It really would.
What about Ali? What about Prem Proven as well? Do you think that that's something that's important as well? Getting in players that are kind of already used to the Premier League.
Yeah, definitely. I think I do wonder now that we're in the era of Serie A players or Mendes clients. There seems to be a bit of a theme for a lot of the players bought thus far.
Yeah.
But that's probably now me being unfair and Paratici. He's over there, whatever it was, 11 years at Juventus. They weren't all just Serie A players. He was scouted across the world. He's bringing them in from various leagues. So hopefully that's what Tottenham have to come. But I'd be intrigued to see whether they do monitor the Dybala situation. I really do, because obviously having a player that they've missed out on, and that player is available for free in the summer at the moment. He may sign a new contract, he might do. I'm intrigued to see whether they go back in for him or not. I wonder whether I'll end up having another Dybala summer or not, trying to work out whether he's actually coming or not.
As an avid watcher, Ali, as we all are of your videos, it's just, watching that back now, those times where you've done those interviews late in the morning, it's, the frustration. Sorry, there's to Lee, quickly, go on, Lee.
Sorry, Rick, sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask, this is to everyone, obviously, with Ali as well, but part of what looks so obvious on the outside to us, like, we're just fans, right? So we don't know the inner workings of the club, and it's all speculation, so on and so forth. But when you talked about Tariq Lamptey there, to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. He's English, for the homegrown quota, like I know Ali you like to talk about. I know we haven't talked about that much this window, but homegrown quota, Premier League proven, it'd be an absolute beast in that system, that, as you just said, with Conte, and Steve Hitchin, maybe not so much over this last two transfer windows, but previous to that, what is he doing for this from a scouting perspective as well? Like, I know we're talking about balance there, but if it's so obvious to us as mere mortal fans, how are we not having these conversations with these players, or are we having these conversations with these players? Do you see what I mean? Like, if there was 70 million euros available for the striker from Inter, Lautaro
Martinez,
yeah, that's the one. Better pronunciation than me, clearly. If there was that money there in the summer, where did it go? And also, we haven't signed a permanent striker, and I know this is something that you're really passionate about, Ali, as well. We haven't signed a permanent striker since Fernando Llorente in 2017. Now, it might be Daniel Levy's door because he's not sanctioning money, but surely there must be strikers out there that would come and want to play for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and that has to sit with the recruitment side of the football club, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, there's certain players, I've just thrown Lamptey in there, Dybala and people like that. And sometimes it's not as simple as that. If I was playing, FIFA Football Manager, I would certainly say I'd do that. I'd go and sign those players. But I suppose in the reality, sometimes clubs just don't want to sell. Or, even for 50, 60 million, they may not want to sell. Or, for a good example is, I know Spurs really kind of sniffed around Graham Potter over the summer as their potential manager.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, Potter didn't want to come. He didn't want to change Brighton for Tottenham Hotspur, which, with no disrespect to Brighton, but in the past, surely that shouldn't have really been much of a decision to make. And I think that maybe says a lot about some of the things going on at the Spurs as well. A worry about maybe whether he'd be able to do what he does at Brighton and have that kind of autonomy and things like that. So, I think that maybe extends to players as well. It's, whether they feel that they're going to get to have as many minutes as they would at another club. Would they fit in as well? On the Lautaro Martinez thing, because I always get asked that question. Where did the money go? Honestly, I get it so much. But kind of people forget that bid was earlier in the window. So after that, they signed Emerson Royale, they signed Pape Maté Sarr and stuff like that. So that a big old chunk of that money did go. I don't think it was ever really up to like 70 million that was talked about. I don't, what we've got to understand with Daniel Levy especially, and you'll have seen it now. I don't know if you guys saw the figures, the actual breakdown of the financials for the Bentancur and the Kulusevski deals.
Yeah.
They are like 5 million now, another 5 million in 27 years' time. Things like that. Honestly, they are so structured. So I get the idea when people see this headline figure of a £70 million bid, but it's just not that. It's whatever it's like the Dele Alli. I know we're going to talk about Dele later, no doubt, but people see that and they see either a free transfer or they see a £40 million all-in signing. It's kind of, it's somewhere in the middle. And sorry to go massively off tangent.
No, you're fine.
But I just sometimes signings aren't as simple as we'd all love them to be. Otherwise, Spurs would be like the Harlem Globetrotters. They'd be absolutely incredible.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally agree. Now, we're 25 minutes into the show. So we're only 4 hours behind, and we haven't even started January yet. So buckle in. But we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners that are on audio. For our watching audience on YouTube, just before we kick off the second half, we've received some really, really sad news that I think is coming through in the last few moments that Maurice Norman, a defender in the 1960-61 double side, has passed away. So again, listen, always devastating when you hear that news. Someone that's obviously very closely connected to the football club, that's brought us, again, so many tremendous memories, trophies, of course. We wish, I say, him and his family well at this very sad time, and I'm sure Spurs will do some form of a tribute ahead of that Brighton game at the weekend. So like I say, all our thoughts on the last one on Spurs, go to him and his family, and really, really sad news. Right, okay. Ali, I think it's fair to say, listen, we've had hundreds of questions that have come in, and I must say, listen, we try our best to read out as many as we can, guys, on this show, but for the sake of Ali, we want to get as much information as we can out of the man. If we were to read every single one of our questions, there wouldn't be actually time to talk about the January window. So what we've decided to do, we're going to pick a few out, and we know when Ali last came on that he loves to answer funny questions that may not come up in his normal routine of interviewing Antonio Conte. So we're going to throw a couple in. And guys, again, listen, feel free if you want to throw some in the comments, and we'll read some of the funny ones out for Ali to answer. I know we don't want it all to be, obviously, listen, we like football-based, of course, but humour goes a long way. So Ali, just a couple for you here. Paddy Harnett, who says, why did Ali not take Monday off? That's from him. And Paul Thompson says, who has been the nicest manager to interview, the funniest to interview, and the most difficult? Sorry, 3 questions there, Ali. What am I doing to you?
Right. Yeah, apologies for not taking Monday off. For some crazy reason, Football.London wanted me to work on transfer deadline day. I don't know why.
Can't believe that. Unbelievable.
It was a really busy day. There was 6 transfers. First team transfers happened. What were the 3 different manager things? What was it? Funny.
So, who has been the nicest manager to interview?
Nicest manager. It's got to be Poch. Poch was a good guy. Had a really good relationship with him, obviously built up over a few years, and he very kindly, I can't remember if I've ever said this before or not, but a few weeks after the Painted Champions League final, when he was absolutely gutted, I did something I never normally ever do. I asked for a bit of a family favour because my nephew Michael, who's a huge Spurs fan, season ticket holder, was getting married. And his wife-to-be had asked me if there was anything I could do, just anything Spurs-related. And, I'm not that kind of person. I never ask for anything that's in line with my work whatsoever. But suffice to say, when he did a little speech for her, and she did her little speech for him on the day, suddenly a big TV was wheeled out. And on it was Poch sitting on his boat in the middle of the Mediterranean, wishing them both a fantastic day on their wedding day. And, stuff like that. It was just the measure of the guy. I was very lucky. A lot of pre-season tours where we get to sit down with him, with the cameras are off, the microphones put away, and everything. And he was just genuinely a really good guy. He was.
Then we got the funniest to interview, Ali.
Funniest out of the managers. Was fun. We never really got to see Grumpy Jose. We never kind of got to that stage. He was always pretty good with us. He liked to have a laugh. He liked to try and catch me out a few times, especially remember Japhet Tanganga. I think we all thought Japhet's contract was about to end, and we didn't realise that the club had activated another year on it. So Muggins here kind of brought it up in a press conference, and he was like, "You're wrong," and I did this big thing of, "Oh, brilliant." He was good fun. I'm like Antonio so far. He's got a bit of a sense of humour as well. He likes to have a laugh and stuff. Yeah. So no, he's good. Was the last one difficult?
Most difficult. Do you know what's funny, Ali? When I watched your videos in the early stages of Nuno, I was like, I could see that you were like really struggling. I was like, this guy just wants to get some questions in. Then didn't he criticise you after you said Skip? He's got a good player there. I don't want to talk about individuals.
Yeah, he's like scolding you.
Yeah, I like Nuno as a person. He was very nice. He's a good guy. You could tell he was a good person, but trying to have press conference with him, honestly, it was like, you guys with kids will know, trying to get your kids to kind of eat their dinner when they're young, they just don't want to eat it. That was Nuno in a press conference trying to get him to say anything. It was so frustrating, just like stirring his head, like, no, I'm not doing it. And Yeah, he kind of ended up having this weird relationship with me where I ended up being like almost like a naughty schoolboy. He was like, "Oh, you cannot ask me this. You know you cannot ask me this," and "Oh, Alasdair," and stuff like this. It was like, "What?" Just asking the most normal questions as well.
Yeah.
And he was. When you got him talking, he was good. And like even
Yeah.
that question, I remember he kind of was like, "Oh, how you can't ask me that," because I was saying about Jose as a future captain. Do you see that in him and all this sort of stuff? And he kind of slated it to begin with, and then gave me a really brilliant answer about Oliver Skip, and he went off for about a minute, talking about a minute and a half. But honestly, God, our press conference, doing the transcripts afterwards, we divide it up sometimes between us to try and kind of break it down. And Nuno's were like 9 minutes.
Oh yeah,
Pop, for example, were 45.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So yeah, definitely difficult. Not because he was an unpleasant person in any way, but just because he just wanted to be out there coaching his team. He just didn't believe there was anything to be had or benefited from by the media.
I must say, Ali, though, haven't you got the problem now with Conte that, if anything, the answers are so long, you just want to get a question now, don't you?
Yeah, he's a bit like Poch. Poch used to waffle. Conte doesn't waffle, but what he does was he'll just shove in everything he'll want to talk about in one answer. And especially the worst thing you could do with Antonio Conte is ask him 2 questions in one. Because if you do, your first question is dead. It's gone. He will always just answer the second question. So sometimes you'll see journalists kind of like, "Oh, can I also ask you about this?" As soon as they do that, that second question is the one he answers. And he's especially if the first one is the one he doesn't want to answer. He's very clever in that way.
But is the key, Ali, for you? Is the key, Ali, for you? You just don't want to go first, do you? Because you want to ask a question that doesn't relate straight away. Because I heard you say this on your YouTube channel. You want to ask a question that doesn't relate straight away to the game. You just want to, you want to be second or third in that list, right?
Yeah, especially post-match is the one for that, definitely. Yeah, because it has to be a general question. If there's something huge has happened, then yes, you can probably say, you can get it in there. If there's a massive penalty incident or something really bad happened in the game, of course you can go there. But ultimately, 9 times out of 10, those presses, the first question is, "Antonio, what did you think of the performance? What do you think of the result?" And then you feed off of the answer from that. Obviously, with the Zoom nature of things, you're muted after your first question often, and it's someone else has to go.
We saw you when you was muted. That was hilarious. I've got to say, I know, but honestly, that was. I think all of us were cracking up. I mean, it was brilliant.
Just on that, on presses and stuff like that, it's just fascinating to me. When you do have to ask the first question or the second question after, I don't know, like the Moura defeat, for example, I remember you getting some outstanding answers out of him, Ali, from how. Because he's he seems like he wears his heart on his sleeve, like massively. Tell it how it is. He doesn't hold back. Is that more exciting as a journalist, or is that more difficult as a journalist? Because you've got somebody who's pissed off, basically. He's just lost a football match, and you've now got to interview him. And you don't really want to be there, or do you revel in that because you're going to get some good answers out of him?
Well, don't forget, I just came from Nuno. So I absolutely revel in the fact that I can get information. 100%. Moura was. It sounds so weird to say, but it was brilliant in terms of horrendous match, horrendous performance. But what came out of the aftermath of that was a real, almost like a pivotal moment. I felt for Conte's kind of early weeks. It was very much like, this is a mess. I've really worked out how things need to change in this club, and he was so honest with us. And I think because we were all there in person, and that was a proper press conference, that wasn't a Zoom one. We were allowed to be there, and he could connect with us, and he could see us face to face. And honestly, I'd give anything for those kind of press conferences. I was about to say give that press conference every week, but no, I don't want Moura matches every week because that was
winning.
But that kind of
we are going to hand over to John to start the January transfer show. 35 minutes late, but let's say Spurs about that. Let's go over to John to start this show.
Yeah, obviously with the window now shut, we've got loads to talk about. Lots happened, and we can sort of look back and go over that. And what a lot went on. We moved on finally. Tongi and Ndombele, Giovanni Lo Celso, Dele Alli, Brian Hill went out on loan. Jack Clark, and obviously 2 signings came in Kulevetsky and Bentancur. But most of the action happened right at the end of the window. And I'm just wondering, I saw noticed on your recent video as well, Ali, that you made a point that Conte was content with what had been done. and various things that he'd been asked for had been carried out. But have you heard from anyone close to Conte whether there was any sort of frustration that business was not done earlier than deadline day, as we've seen with Tottenham repeatedly over the years?
Not so much, but I think that was kind of evident in his press conferences, to be honest. He was bringing it up so much. And sometimes the question wasn't even really about that. And he was bringing it back to, we have to make improvements. We have to. It was almost like you could see him not panicking, but kind of saying to the club, like, what's happening? Why haven't we done anything yet, kind of thing. But on the flip side, I think he is fully aware of how the club operates. And especially in the January window, they were always going to try and look for bargains towards the end, as much as we hate that, as much as it's the most frustrating thing as fans, as journalists, whatever. It definitely makes you tear your hair out. But yeah, I didn't get that sense in terms of the people around him. I spoke to, spoke to his camp in recent days just to find out, kind of test the water. And yeah, there is this feeling, and I think I remember Jose saying in a press conference once, don't ever ask any manager whether they wanted more in a transfer window, because they'll always say yes. Of course they do. They want more. They want everything to be better and better and better. So of course he wanted more from it, but he's content with kind of what's been done. I'm sure we're going to expand on this in a minute, but I think you can see the threads of what they want to start doing starting to happen in this window. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't the perfect window by a long shot. And I completely agree that, and I'm sure he would have been frustrated at the fact that everything was 6 transfers in the last day. I think I said this in my video the other day. It's like, we're not even just talking about the month. We're talking about the pre-planning before that month as well. And, if we're going to talk about recruitment and stuff, that would have as soon as Conte came in, the recruitment would have all been focused on what the January window would have needed to shape a team around him. And obviously, yes, he had that meeting, didn't he? He had a follow-up meeting in early January, which was a key one. Although technically, he was ready to have that meeting from about Christmassy time. I think he'd sorted out his evaluation. So why that didn't happen until later in January? Was it about January 5th, 6th, or something like that? It was a bit into the month. Yeah, 100% agree. I don't know why it was done so late, and I'm sure we're going to delve into that a little bit more when we talk about some of the players involved.
Do you think there might have been maybe a feeling from Conte that he does understand that January is a very difficult window to buy players in? I know a lot of fans are obviously frustrated we didn't get more than 2 through the door, but do you think Conte might understand that January is always so difficult to kind of bring players in during this month?
Yeah, he said it himself. He said it in press conferences. I think he certainly in a couple of them, he said, look, I understand. It's, actually, it was one answer to me. I asked him about, it was in one of the last presses before the window, before they went off for the international break. I said, are you actually confident you're going to get anyone in? And I think he said in that, it's a difficult window. And, we kind of look for the right opportunities, but perhaps this is the window where it shouldn't even just be about opportunities. It was almost just like, get me someone in, get me some bodies in, because, ironically, at that point, he wanted more bodies and eventually ended up with less bodies, but that's a whole other matter. Everything I've understood from those who've kind of, those he's dealt with and everything and people around him is that he was well aware of what the situation was. Always, when he had that evaluation meeting with the club, the word I kept hearing from different people was sensible, that it was a sensible meeting. Everyone understood the parameters and what they were trying to do, what they wanted to do ideally, but what maybe would be realistic for them. So I think we've got his press conference on Friday. Unless something incredible has happened behind the scenes that we're not aware of, I think he's probably going to be happy enough in that press conference. I'm sure he would probably, you'd say most managers would for the public eye, but I don't think Conte's that kind of guy. I think he would just say what he felt.
Ali, I've got a 2-part question to ask you, if that's all right. Listen, you revealed at the very start of January that the feeling within the club was that Spurs needed a right-wing back, a left-sided centre-back and a striker. And from what you understood as well, Conte agreed that the club would like to ideally bring in a central midfielder if that became available. So that's 4 positions there. I just wonder, like you said there, and like Jamie's touched upon it, is a difficult window. Do you think overall, by the fact we didn't deliver him a striker, or like we said, that left-sided centre-back, or as when, again, a right wing-back, whether, he is you've used that word content already. Is that the word you would still describe based on the fact that we haven't nailed down those targets that was set out for January?
Yeah, I mean, just on those positions, they kind of slightly changed in that it was the club who wanted the left-sided centre-back, the striker and the right wing-back. That was what they'd identified. Conte, in that evaluation meeting, said, yeah, I kind of agree with that, but I really want a central midfielder. That was his specific request. So then it kind of evolved into, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll look for three. We'll look for a right wing-back. Obviously, they had in mind Traore. We'll get that central midfielder for you, and we'll have. It was a striker, but it kind of evolved over the window into an attacker, which is one of those where you can use it, and then you can use it for Luis Diaz. You could use it for Kulusevski technically. And so what they did was they decided to shelve the plans for a left-sided centre-back until the summer, because they felt that, maybe if you keep Japhet Tanganga, he's your backup left-sided centre-back just until then. I think as soon as the Traore deal fell through, I think it was disappointing from my point of view that they didn't have other names in the list who they could have gone for as a right wing back. There's various, if they are going to plunder Serie A, there's some very good young right wing backs there. Was it Genoa? I've got a good one whose name's going out of my head. Is it Cambiasso? He's quite a good young player in that role. You've got Torino's, it's Singo. I've forgotten his name. I've written about him so many times. The names have actually gone out.
I think Lavezzi was one that came up potentially. I don't know. There's so many different names out there.
Yeah, there were plenty. But obviously, again, that's maybe me looking at it from the idealistic side, and those clubs may not have wanted those players to go. I don't know. But I think the contentment is the fact that he got his central midfielder. That's the one thing he specifically requested, and he got it. He's got himself an attacking midfielder who's very versatile and can play in a couple of the positions that Spurs needed kind of help in, as it were, or he needed help in. I think, to be honest, he's more content with the players that have gone out. But obviously, I know we'll come to that in a bit. I think that's been a big old factor for him, and that's probably where he's been backed the most, to be honest.
Yeah.
Alex, just on that, because you mentioned about central midfielder, and we were heavily linked with almost a done deal with who I like to call Acrobat, but obviously it's Amrabat. And then obviously Amrabat just fell off. He fell off the trapeze, right? In the sense of, we got Ricky Bentancur rather than Rodrigo, because he's obviously Ricky's double. But is Conte happy with that, Ali? In the sense of, because I read so many different, obviously we all did, but read so many different reports that he really liked Amrabat. And I think you reported that he had, he liked Amrabat, although the fans didn't. Most of the fans, if you go to Twitter poll, they were like, "Who the hell is this? We don't want him." But my vision of backing Conte is give him what he wants. If he wants Amrabat, you give him Amrabat. So is he happy with Ricky Bentancur?
Amrabat's a funny one. Amrabat, I saw him obviously very. How do I put this? A lot of the reports had it as very advanced, and very much so. Any time I ever asked around about Amrabat, I kept getting told the same thing. It was the agent pushing him. It was the agents offering and pushing. And it wasn't someone that was on their original list. And it was someone that was offered. I think his agents are the same as Bale, Roden, Ben Davies. I think it's ICM. Yeah. So obviously there's a good relationship there with Spurs. So it may well be that he was offered and that Conte showed some interest in someone that he likes. But if we're going to be brutal about it, you've got Amrabat, who I'm sure is a very good player, or you've got a three-time Serie A title-winning midfielder who's
24 years old and scored within a minute yesterday.
And Conte's no mug. He not only will know Serie A inside out, he will know his old club Juventus inside out. And I'm sure price-wise, you're looking at a similar kind of thing for Amrabat and Bentancur. It may have been Amrabat, I think, might have even been a loan. So if they've gone for Bentancur, it's got to have been Conte saying yes to that. And I'm sure we'll find out on Friday, but it seemed like a bit of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's good to clarify that out, because there's a lot of fans that that kind of go, didn't want Acrobat or
Yeah.
Amrabat, and actually it's a good deal, right?
Very, very quickly, Ali, did you at any point nearly have to do a retake on your YouTube when you mainly said Acrobat, or have you been Amrabat all the way?
I think I've been Amrabat. Yeah, I don't think I've ever chucked in an Acrobat, which is, you know, which is strange for someone who absolutely kills pronunciations as much as I do. That I haven't managed to do that.
I'll tell you what, Ali. The problem with this window is I've had to learn names a month in advance and coming through. You just don't get any warning with that Amrabat one. It came out of nowhere. And with the show the next night, I had no chance to prepare for it. I had 24 hours of Kulusevski, thankfully. So, yeah, I mean, I was watching your videos, Ali, at the very early stages for Paratigi's name. That just kept changing. It was Paratigi. Then it was that just kept changing with Paratigi.
Don't let me go into the old ways of even saying what I used to say because it was thick back in my head. No, I'm not saying it. But Paratigi, it was made very clear to me by people in the club that I was saying it wrong, and here was how to say it properly. So it's like, okay, I will stick to that.
Right. Okay. For the sake of the show, to try and keep it on some kind of some rails here, let's go back to Lee, because I think, Lee, you're next on our list in terms of the questions. Over to you, Lee. And Lee's on mute. Not often you can shut Lee McQueen up, but there you go. Let's go to Lee.
I know, I'm losing the plot on the questions. But so I'll just go, and we might have covered some of this off, so I'll try and, paraphrase it if we have. But Chinga Ndombele, Giovanni Celso, Dele Alli, the first two have gone out on loan, obviously, to Lyon and Villarreal. And actually, I wanted to ask a bit of a left-sided question on that one, is that you mentioned about a left-sided centre-back waiting till the summer. Obviously, there's a lot of people putting 2 and 2 together, probably coming up with 6, me included. With Lo Celso going out on loan to Villarreal, do you think there's some sort of sweetening the deal for maybe a Pau Torres to come in the summer as a left-sided centre-back? Is that the way, do you think Paratigi's working in that way or not? I'm just being weird.
I'd love to think so, because yes, he's a very good defender. I think it was more down to player choice. I think they offered Gio to various clubs. I think he turned down a few, but Villarreal was one that he wanted to go to. So I'd probably say that's more a player-led decision on that one. I mean, he's joining up with Foyth, isn't he, as well, and Sergio Riera as well. Yeah, there's a few old Spurs boys there. So no, who knows? Who knows what the summer brings, and whether there's that good relationship there already built with the Van Foyth deal and now on the Celso. So perhaps that makes it easier in the summer. But if they could get a player of that quality, that defence would be something very special next season.
Amazing, wouldn't
it?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's go over to John next. John, over to you.
When you look back on that transfer window, we've talked about quite a lot already of 2019 in terms of the incomings and the players that just moved on, Tanguy and Ndombele, Lo Celso, Sessegnon, Jack Clarke. On reflection, is that one of Spurs' worst ever transfer windows? Because, I just look at the sums involved, and there's a bigger question there, and obviously it lines in with Steve Hitchen going to there, about due diligence, about whose job it is at the club to, not only that we will see a player on YouTube or watching live games or whatever, and we think, oh, there's a player there and we can be excited about, but who's doing the background on these players? Who's checking out that, are they able to settle? Are they going to have issues acclimatising to a new environment, a new setup, a new club? And I just think, is that a bigger issue for Tottenham? They should be getting people in that can do that kind of due diligence, and whether one of the reasons Steve Hitchens had to go is because simply it's been proven that he hasn't done that enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should clarify on the Steve Hitchens thing as well. I think he resigned. So I'm not entirely sure he had to go, but I appreciate what you're saying. I completely agree with the... I think the biggest problem with Spurs, and this is probably partly why they were able to get players like Tanguy at the time, is that Spurs maybe know they have to take a slight gamble on a player, I guess, whereas other clubs maybe wouldn't. So someone like Tanguy, they would have looked at him. I think it was them and Juventus. I think Man City were interested at the beginning, but ultimately it came down to Spurs and Juventus and Paratigi, ironically. I think Spurs just have this thing of, I suppose, I'm trying to think of previous examples, but they will always try and take a little bit of a gamble on the player who might, maybe other clubs, if there's any kind of battle for a player in a transfer market, Spurs will back out. They'll step to the side. Whereas I think maybe with Tanguy there was a feeling of, yeah, of course, everyone has said it. Every club he's been at, he's a little bit how do I put it? He's a bit of a maverick. He likes to play the Tongi way rather than maybe the team way, and you're going to have to work on his fitness and things like that. And I think maybe from Spurs there was that sense of a gamble in that. Okay, well, we've got Mauricio Pochettino, who is essentially like the midfielder whisperer, the player whisperer, whatever. He can take a player like that and turn him into something special. Ultimately, you know, I suppose Poch didn't get very long with Tongi. It didn't really work like that. You do wonder what would have happened to him had he stayed there. But yeah, in hindsight, yeah, it was a dreadful window. It was at the time. It was the best window ever. It was so good. You know, Spurs think big. Everyone calls them Spurs to spend their money, and essentially all in when Lo Celso's deal was made permanent. They spent about 115 million on those two alone. And you know, it was a window where the manager, ironically, after windows when nothing happened, he was finally backed. And now, like you say, in hindsight, the worst window probably imaginable in terms of who's been a success out of it. As I say, I still hope Ryan Sessegnon will be eventually, but it's just his last man standing, really. I mean, that's Jack Clark's technically still at the club, but I think we could probably safely assume it's not going to happen for him at Tottenham, unfortunately.
Just before we go back around to Jamie, Ali, I just want to ask you, do you feel generally that there should be much more due diligence done by Spurs in terms of players, you know, look the likes of Ndombele, that, you know, some will feel, and Jamie's going to ask you about him in a second, that you look at his career and what went before him at Tottenham, there was a feeling that Ndombele, there was that element of his career where we could have maybe seen that potentially coming. It's always difficult. Listen, I'm not recruiting. You know, recruitment
is about talent, though, is it, Rick? It's not just about talent, is it?
Yeah,
it's about
but I just look at, again,
the people
Lo Celso
around you, your behaviour, and all that sort of stuff. And if you can't settle in, you know, there is that gamble. He might go and tear it up again at Lyon, mightn't he?
Yeah, he might do, but
his home environment.
But I must ask you, Ali, for you, due diligence-wise, do you think the club are going to be a lot more maybe stringent on that from what has happened in the past and spending big and not always getting the success when they have spent big?
Yeah, I think they've definitely been burned. I think you can see that. They certainly have, which was why I did wonder whether you'd see any big bids kind of in the summer or this one because of what had happened. It's a difficult one because I do think that due diligence was put in. Like I said in my last answer, I kind of feel that they did that and then still thought it's a gamble that's worth taking, because if we can straighten him out, he's going to be one of the best players in Europe. You know, that guy is the most gifted footballer, and he really is. And you know, anyone who knows my thoughts on Tongi knows that there's hardly anyone more gutted than I that it just hasn't worked for him. But I've sat there in the press box. I've seen him strolling up and down in his warm-up, not really bothering. And it's just that kind of guy. He's so laconic and laid back. I don't know if anyone will change him. And yeah, you know, maybe the due diligence should have told them, look, so many people now have tried to change him and it hasn't worked. Can Poch really be any different? And ultimately, Spurs can do it. So yeah, I think they have to. I think they'll be much stricter on their thinking behind stuff. I think the two Juve lads that, you know, we'll talk about, I think you can see they're both deemed to be good lads, hard workers. You know, it's boys that'll get their head down under Conte. And, you know, Conte always uses that phrase, doesn't he? Players I can count on. I can count on him. I can't. And that's what he wants now. And that's, I think, what Paratici will be looking for, players that he can count on.
Just quickly, I know, but just going off script again, just Ali on that point. You know, when you, and I'm not lining up excuses before I start getting, you know, pelters in the comments or, you know, start atting me or whatever. But, you know, Tottenham Dembele come to the football club with a massive price tag on his head. And he's only 22 years old, doesn't speak the language. He played for Poch for about 5 minutes, literally, because Poch never integrated players straight into the team, did he? That was always his way. He'd always take a while. He didn't get that much time because by November, he'd left. And then Mourinho comes in, like literally 12 hours later, and then he's got to embed under that. Then he left. Then we've got Nuno. Then he left. Now you've got Conte. So if you look at just Tottenham Dembele, regardless of, you know, due diligence and everything that's going on, he's coming to his football club. London has eaten up more people than, you know, or worse people, better people, if you like, than Tottenham Dembele. It's a big, big place to come, and he's had 4 different managers. It's a pretty crazy journey, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It is a bit of a crazy journey for the lad.
Yeah, he said that today, didn't he? In his Leon press conference.
Oh, did he? Oh,
said,
sorry. I didn't know.
Yeah, he said essentially that I've had 5 different managers, including Ryan Mason as well.
Oh, yeah, of course.
To a degree, I agree with him. But on the flip side is that's 5. Well, let's take out Poch. That's 4 managers that he had certain issues with at different times. It's like, maybe if you've got one difficult manager, you can then say at your next club that's happened. But when you're saying, I have 5 different managers, it's like, yeah, well, maybe it wasn't the managers. It's and this is from someone who is such a big Tongi fan, but he just couldn't adjust. I suppose just his mentality. He got in shape. He really did, honestly. This last few months, he's been the fittest he's ever been at Tottenham. But ultimately, it's more than fitness. It's more than talent. It's just having that kind of ability on the football pitch to know what your role is, what your tasks are, being able to carry them out for your teammates. And he was so hit and miss. I saw him some matches sprinting back to make tackles. He would do that. It's not like he couldn't do it. And it wasn't like he wasn't fit enough. There's this kind of whole myth. People call him on the belly and stuff like that. He'd go to McDonald's, all this rubbish. He was not fat. He didn't have any paunch. He wasn't even unfit. Just didn't really want to do it. That's all it was. There were certain times he just thought, no, I want to be up there attacking. I don't want to get back. And he wouldn't put in a hard tackle. It's just Tongi, unfortunately. He is literally Tongi. That's what he is.
Yeah.
Just to keep it on Tongi, of course, we saw him head out on loan to Lyon. There's obviously a reported buyout or buy clause option that they've got on him. Kind of what was the thinking behind that deal? Because obviously that buy clause is 65 million euros, and I think it's very unlikely that Lyon are probably going to activate that or take up that option. So do you kind of think there's any chance of Tongi maybe returning to Spurs, or what might be the way that we look to get Tongi out the door? Will it be a case of we hope that he plays well in Lyon, and then other French clubs look to negotiate a deal? What was kind of the thinking behind sending him out loan with such a big release clause?
I think you kind of nailed it at the end there, really. It's on him going back to the club he was at, where he made his name, really, putting in some star performances, and just garnering interest in him. Because, I'd be stunned if it doesn't make any financial sense for Lyon to buy him back for almost in total the same amount they sold him for. It doesn't really make any sense at all. There was some talk, I haven't seen the quotes, but Guesty was telling me earlier that I think in the Lyon press conference today, it was said that one of the directors or something at Lyon, I don't think it was Orlas, I think it was someone else, had said that Tongi pushed for the option to buy. Like I said, I haven't seen the quotes. I'm not saying that's definite.
Yeah.
But I think that's certainly what was kind of made out to me, which is interesting because, the moment I saw the figure of that option, it was like, come on, Lyon, I don't think have that sort of money. The Liga has been probably hit just as hard by anyone by the pandemic. I know they had some big TV rights issues as well. So I'd be surprised, but ultimately, I hope Tongi goes there and smashes it. He said today, technically I still belong to Tottenham Hotspur. I could be playing for Tottenham next season.
Yeah.
He could. The odds are probably against it if Conte's still there. But, we'll see.
Ali, before we stick with Jamie, we've got a listener question in here. And you're going to, this will be relevant to you more than ever. This is from Anthony Silva, 23, who says, is Alasdair still issuing the laminated and Domley fan club cards, or is the fan club cards on hold for now, Ali? That's a big question now, $1 million question, Ali.
Yeah, they've been put away in a drawer, I'm afraid. Currently on pause, waiting to see what happens next. But I'm guessing they're going to be gathering dust. I don't think they're going to be used again, unfortunately.
Right, we'll just go back to Jamie. Joe, over to you.
Yes, obviously another player, as we mentioned in that disastrous 2019 window, the other big purchase was Giovanni Lo Celso. I thought this was a really strange kind of exit from Spurs, really, because he played a fairly big part in that Leicester match. Of course, we saw him joining in the celebrations. And you'd have thought if he was coming on into a match like that, you'd think he was totally trusted by Conte. But it all seemed to kind of quickly go downhill, and maybe there were some reports that he wasn't really liked at Spurs, and maybe Antonio Conte didn't trust him. Is there any kind of truth in that maybe he wasn't so liked at the club, he wasn't really trusted by Conte? Do you find that his exit quite strange?
It was brutal. It was very brutal the way it kind of all happened. It was just essentially told, you're not going to be in this squad today because you're not in my plans. In terms of him not being liked, the impression I always got, and this is probably true of a lot of players, is if Gio wasn't starting, then he could be a bit of a, I don't want to say a pain in the backside, but he would let it be known he wasn't happy, which a lot of players are like. But yeah, he's such a funny character in that we had those 3 glorious months when he earned himself the permanent deal, and he was superb. I always remember that long dribbling run he did in the FA Cup. Who was that? Was it Middlesbrough or Southampton? I can't remember.
Southampton away, yeah. Southampton away.
Yeah. And it was just kind of gave this glimpse of a player that we probably never really got. He's had little glimpses of moments like, I saw that video, which, yes, was quite amusing, his Premier League goals compilation, and it was the one goal against Man City. And yes, it's all very funny, and it did make me chuckle. But it's sad in a way, because this is a guy who creatively was very clever. He could do certain things with the ball. He worked hard. If anyone, out of the ones that kind of went, I kind of thought Gio was the one that Conte would like the most. But it didn't seem to work out that way.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely for him, for a player with his ability to thread a pass and also get into some decent areas, just never produced enough assists and goals. There's a big weakness. There's a sense of him being maybe in Spain a deeper line player when he was with Betis. Perhaps that's where he should have been playing. Certainly for Argentina, he plays on the left of a 3, doesn't he? Maybe he will say he never got used really enough in his proper position. But it just never worked for him. Just a funny player, and he was very rarely ever put up for interviews. He was never particularly interested in doing that, and I think that maybe says some things as well. Just never did he ever truly settle. I don't know.
Just one quick question. I see someone in the comments mention about Lo Celso being able to take free kicks. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that, but that's one thing that Spurs have really been missing. Someone that can take a really good set piece. Is that something that the club may be aware of, that they're missing a real true set piece taker? Is that something that maybe they look for?
You mean you don't like Harry Kane's free kicks? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
I think we've liked one, haven't we? I think we've liked one ever in his career, bless him. Well, just that one.
Yeah, he did a crossbar. He hit a crossbar against City, I think. I remember that.
I'd say I'd place them just below Eriksen's free corners. I think. I'd say that how you will.
I don't think Lo Celso's corners were much better either, unfortunately.
No, not that one against Everton anyway.
No, I mean, I don't know. Is that something you specifically look for, a set piece taker? I don't know if that's an actual brief you look for in a player. I think it's probably a bonus in someone that you're already searching for. But yeah, of course, James Ward-Prowse is incredible. His set piece is just the most ridiculous things ever. Yeah. And he is a player that Spurs have been interested in, and they've kind of looked into trying to sign in the past. It just hasn't happened for some reason. I think he's a guy who is just a good midfielder that happens to also be very good at set pieces as well. Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, but I hazard a guess that no, it's probably not something you specifically look for. But it's definitely been a massive deficiency at Tottenham, I agree. I mean, even Sonny's corners, they're hit and miss. He takes some really terrific ones sometimes, but then other occasions they're a little bit iffy. Yeah, they haven't really found someone. I think Harry Winks also weighs in with corners now at times as well. Yeah, it's definitely been a role that's never really been properly assigned since Eriksen left. And yeah, it's a good point.
Let's go over to John.
Just to come in on a couple of points you've made there, Ali. Firstly, on the free kicks, actually, just sprung to mind. I mean, I was sat in Marseille when England played Russia, and I was surprised as anybody when Eric Dyer stepped up for that free kick and bent it into the top corner. We've probably seen him take under 5 free kicks for Tottenham in the whole period of time since then. And there have been times when Harry Kane hasn't been on the pitch, or Eriksen wasn't on the pitch or whatever. And I just think, had he been given a significant period of time of opportunities, would he have scored more free kicks than we have done generally as a team? I think we probably would have done. Looking at the lack of other options, do you think that could be a sensible one moving forward, considering Eric Dyer's continued now involvement in the team under Antonio Conte?
Yeah, I think it's a great shout. Didn't he take one recently that either the keeper pushed out and it was scored, or it hit a woodwork and came out and the player scored. It really rings a bell.
Yeah, was that Regulon? Who took that free kick? Was it the Regulon one?
Yeah, wasn't that Dyer?
Wasn't
That Dyer, and then Regulon followed it up. So
Yeah,
yeah, no, I
followed
think
it
you're
up.
absolutely right. Yeah, no, I think they released training grounds footage as well of Dyer smashing him in the top corner in the free kicks. Yeah, for one reason or another, is it Harry Kane not throwing his weight about, but his seniority maybe, is that getting him to do that? I don't know, but yeah, he's certainly a guy that we've seen him do it, so I don't understand why he doesn't get the opportunity to do it more. That's a great shout. It is.
And then just a couple other points. You mentioned about the Celso and obviously Ndombele. Now, with Ndombele, I'm just wondering, I haven't heard this reported anywhere, just putting 2 and 2 together. I imagine we still owe Lyon a significant chunk of the outlay we spent on him, the 55 million or whatever it was. Is there any way Tottenham could come to a deal with Lyon whereby they effectively wrote off the remaining 20, 25, 30, whatever million it is that we still owe, and Lyon just simply kept the player from 1st of July?
If there's a way to do it, I'm sure Daniel Levy will do it. If there's any way that ends up saving Spurs some money or issues or problems, yeah, I'd imagine he will. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the specifics of how much is left to pay. French clubs are normally really good about the transparency of the finances involved in transfer deals, but I don't think, I'm trying to remember back how it was actually structured. Because like I say, Juventus one, we got to know all about it. We got to know Bentancur was 3 years. If they sign Kulusevski, it's over 5 years. I don't know what the Ndombele one is, but yeah, it seems like a logical solution if Lyon wanted to go down that route. You can just imagine Lyon doing that and then selling him for a bigger fee or something. They're quite a clever club with their finances, Lyon.
I feel like since we've got Lloris for £8 million, all Leicester just tried to burn us time and time again as a kind of payback.
Right, well, we are going to go for our next break of the show for our listeners on audio, and take you into this break. You're going to hear this very, very special tribute. Now, for our watching audience on YouTube, you didn't hear that, but you're going to go back and hear the audio version in the morning. We were just playing there the Dele Alli tribute. And I don't know about the rest of, I must say first, there's nearly 1,700 of you watching us live. So once again, thank you so much for your incredible support on a night where we have gone gold and got the man himself, Ali Gold. See what I've done there? Like that. I'm not sure Ali's going to be hiring me anytime soon, but I only do four-letter puns, Ali, so I wouldn't be any good for your writing skills, I'll be honest with you. That's why you're the best. I'll leave you to that. But Dele Alli. Yeah, I went from Ali to Dele Alli there, and you messed myself up. Dele Alli, I mean, I've got to say yesterday, and I watched your video, Ali, and I saw your thoughts as well. I was really sad. Really sad.
I'm not going to lie.
We had Lee...
Someone was chopping onions, man.
To get Lee McQueen crying, I tell you, it was really emotional. And again, do you know what's funny? This show, we have different guests on every single week. And I can promise you, in the 5 years we've been doing Last Word on Spurs, and especially in the last 2 years of Last Word on Spurs, Dele Alli has divided opinion every single week, bringing people on, and they'll tell us, look, give Dele more time. Others will say, no, it's time for him to go. Anthony Costa, of course, one of our own, bless him. Anthony was never held back on Dele Alli. And again, really polarised the opinion. And after yesterday, I'm still sitting there thinking, did we do the right thing in letting Dele Alli go? Ali, from one Ali to another, what's your thoughts on Dele's departure? Can you believe it? Has it sunk in? Have we made the right choice?
Yes. If I'm going to be brutally honest, yes. For him as well as Spurs. I was exactly the same. I didn't get to the verge of tears, but I certainly was very sad when I watched those videos because, I was obviously waiting because they put the deal sheet in. It was a really late kind of deal, that one. I had my tweet already. I very rarely ever put a tweet in drafts, but I did earlier that day with my thoughts on Dele because I just hope that people remember him for just what an incredible young player he was for Tottenham. Honestly, that guy, we talk about players that maybe, like Tongi, Tongi has done some great little moments in matches that maybe it didn't really particularly matter. Dele did amazing things in the biggest games against the biggest opposition. He'd score against Chelsea, Man United, Man City, Arsenal, Real Madrid. This guy was... yes, it didn't work out in the end. He couldn't sustain it. I've seen all the cliches of he was this kind of burning fire that eventually had to sizzle out and all this sort of thing. He was going to be one of the best. He really was. And obviously, was it 7 years in total? Spurs maybe got 3.5 incredible years out of him, maybe 4. What he contributed to that was incredible. I've said it before, but I associate Dele with that prime Poch time when I think we probably have never, as kind of maybe our generation of fans and journalists, have never really identified with a team as much as we did that team. I think Dele was front and centre of that. He was this young, funny character who also was incredibly talented, this natural instinct to just arrive in the box. He was like a Frank Lampard 2.0 version, just that instinct to kind of do it. But whereas I guess with Lampard, who ironically is now going to take on the next stage of his career, Lampard was able to consistently adapt and have a long, strung-out career of doing that. Whereas for Dele, that's been his biggest issue. It's been adapting to what came next. And obviously hamstring injuries played a part of it as well. But I've always felt, I don't know if this is just me or not, I always felt, and this sounds really cold the way I'm saying it, it's not exactly how I mean it, but I always think the person that kind of started Dele's decline was Sonny. And the reason I say that is because Dele essentially was the main man with Harry Kane. He played that role off of him so well.
Yeah.
Sonny came in and almost, I don't know, he kind of, as soon as he became a star, he almost became a bit of an upgrade in that role. And that's why I think we saw the Mourinho season where the two of them just incredible together. The numbers they produced were amazing. And I just think Dele kind of almost never really found another role in the team. Even Poch towards the end was like shoving him out on the left at times. And it was like, it doesn't work. Nuno tried him in the middle. Conte tried him in the centre. I think Conte tried him on the right towards the end when Lucas was out or something. And it was just like, I feel sorry for Dele because he's probably never played that real backup to Harry Kane role since. I mean, he may well have done it. He may have been not so great, and that might have contributed to it. But I'll be intrigued to see now how Everton use him. If they use him in the role he's meant to be used in, and where he's absolutely at his best. I think Mourinho use him there when he first came in, and he got a bit of kind of extra wind out of him. I'm trying to remember.
He played pretty well. He scored a peach, didn't he, against Manchester United under Mourinho? Brilliant.
I think he started to wake up a little bit towards the end of Poch's time, and then Mourinho kind of took that on. And then, unfortunately, it's just a massive stagnation for him. And I really hope he goes on to be a big success there because, there's a hell of a talented player in there.
Yeah. Before we go to Lee, Ali, just a very quick listener question we've had in here. Just this is from Martin at Martin Mike, who says, please can we get from Ali the breakdown of Dele's transfer to Everton and what happens if they sell him in the summer?
Right. Okay.
Sorry, that's a bit of a question. That's a big question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So the transfer itself is initially a free transfer. If he plays 20 games, then I think it's Spurs get around, I think it's £10 million. But then there's all other performance-related add-ons that take it to, it's almost 40 million in total. I mean, he's only signed a 2.5-year deal. So even the 20 games in itself, he's not going to be able to do this season because he's cup-tied. So that will happen to be next season. There's a part of me that wonders, and we haven't been able to get kind of confirmation on this. I wonder whether Everton's previous financial fair play issues have played a little bit of a part in this window with the other signings they've made. And I wonder whether, the free transfer element of it helps Everton put it onto their next financial year, perhaps. Maybe that's the way it works out. I presume it can be, because otherwise, why not do a loan with an obligation to buy or something like that? It's such a weirdly constructed transfer that I can only presume that's the element to it. Go on, mate.
Sorry, I was going to say we had the brilliant Kieran Maguire on a few weeks back, didn't we, Rick, on the pod? And he was talking about the financial fair play situation at Everton, and he basically backed up what you've just said, which is that because of financial fair play issues, they can't sign anyone. And I think they'd already signed their.
I think they've got two. They've got two.
Two domestic loans.
So when Dele Alli opportunity came up for them, they obviously had to structure a deal which allowed them to take him on, as what you said. And actually, I quite like that. I quite like the fact that that could have fallen. That could have been another one that was fallen through type situation. But the two clubs worked closely together to make sure that they went through. I think the reason why I was so upset, not upset, don't get me wrong, I weren't like quite. I did have a couple of Kleenex, to be honest with you, right? But it was because of their memories, as you said, like watching their memories and what he'd done. I remember it puts you back in that stadium. I think a lot of people forget he was the one that provided the assist for Lucas Moore's goal, hat-trick in Ajax. People sometimes forget that. That brace against Real Madrid, for personal reasons, for me, it was absolutely unbelievable. I'll never ever forget that in my life. So it's just incredible to see what he's done. And the biggest shock for me was it was a perm move. Now obviously you got Ndombele and Lo Celso and Dele. I can't believe we've shipped all three of them out in this window. I can't believe it. And going back to your point you made earlier about backing Conte, for me that's backing Conte. But I thought that maybe Ndombele would go out on a perm and maybe, I didn't ever think Dele would go out on a perm. I didn't think that. I thought he would go out on a loan and maybe to rediscover his form and then come back. And then when I realised it was a perm, I was like, whoa. So do you think that there's any chance in the future of Dele coming back? Because obviously it's perm now, isn't it? So that's gone.
I don't know. I mean, he did put that kind of little comment out, didn't he? It's the end of a chapter, not the end of the book, or something like that. And it was a really nice message. Obviously, whether he constructed or he did it with help from some kind of expert, I don't know. But it was a lovely message. It really was. I don't know. I think in terms of who goes permanently and who goes on loan, it's just to do with who offered. I don't think they had people queuing up to make a permanent offer for Tongi. I think Lo Celso, in my mind, was probably the one that I felt they maybe could get that because as an Argentina international, seen abroad, especially in Spain, as being that kind of on a certain level, I thought he was the one that maybe would. With Dele, he was certainly offered around a fair few countries as well, I think, not only just in this one. But I think the Everton angle with Lampard, I think Lampard and he share, I think, with the same agency as well.
Really?
Lampard is very much... I know he's a big Gerrard fan, but Lampard as well is a player that obviously Dele's got the similar traits to as well. So you'd look at him and think he can develop him again. I think it had to be a permanent move. I just think we're at this stage now. We're a little bit like if we're going to say about Tongi and the 5 managers. Unfortunately, Dele's had a fair few managers now. It just hasn't worked for him with different ones. I think he had to have this fresh start. Everton are a funny club. They haven't quite reached where they want to be reaching, and maybe this is the perfect time for Dele to go in there. It could be perfect for him, and whether we'll see him again one day, I don't know. I'd say probably the odds are against it, perhaps. I mean, just to go back very briefly to the deal itself, it's still a bit risky for Spurs because let's say touch wood that it never happens, but if Dele were to get a really bad injury and doesn't even make those 20 games in the next 2.5 years, Spurs have just written off all of the money on him. And this was a player who, 3-4 years ago, they probably could have sold for 150 million or something like that when he was at his peak. There's an element of risk in there. There really is.
Yep. We're going to go to Jamie next, and then we'll go to John. Jamie, we're just going to go a bit further forward. I'm just conscious of time that, we are literally, I say we're trying to go pacing through like Adama Traore, but at the moment we're moving as slow as what we saw Sofian Amrabat in one of our compilation clips we put out last one on Spurs. So just conscious of time, we're going to go to Jamie next, and then we'll go to John. Is that all right, Jamie? Over to you.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I'm just caught up. Yes, so obviously one of the players that did come through the door was Rodrigo Bentancur. Of course, a central midfielder. Of course, scored the goal last night. I think got all Spurs fans very excited about him already. Of course, we paid a reported £15.8 million, and I believe that's up front, and then of course maybe an extra £5 million in add-ons. Do you think overall that's a fairly good deal for Spurs? Do you think in kind of the fee that we paid, is that a good deal?
I think so. I mean, I think it's payable over 3 years, so got a bit of time on that as well. And we know all the figures because Juve fantastically, for us journalists, actually published it. It was brilliant. I think he's a player who was a big player, especially in that third title-winning season for Juve. Was it 1920? I think he was. People say it was Sarri's best midfielder. He was superb. He actually contributed a fair few assists as well that season. And he was only 22 as well. This is the thing we forget. He's 24 and he's won 3 Serie A titles. It's just mad. It's absolutely mad. I think it's a good deal. I do. I think he, a little bit like Dele, maybe to a lesser degree, needed a bit of a restart himself. Wasn't really working from under Allegri. It wasn't kind of his system didn't particularly work for him. It's an interesting debate to be had, and I think we'll have this in the months ahead, whether he's better in a 2 or a 3, because the word out of Italy is the suggestions that perhaps he's better in a 3, which what that means for Kulusevski, it could mean that his new teammate doesn't really get in the team. But yeah, no, I do think he's a good player. I mean, I've seen all the various things. Pirlo referring to him last season as essentially like an Iniesta in terms of his ball retention and the way he keeps the ball and how strong he is in possession. There's others that will tell you in the Italian league, watch the Italian league, that maybe sometimes he gives away silly passes when he shouldn't as well. There's other people that said he got a bit disinterested maybe in his last year or so at the club. He didn't feel, maybe that's a byproduct of winning 3 titles. Maybe I don't know how it works, but I mean, he's a winner. At 24 years old, he's a winner, and that's something Spurs don't have a lot of. So I think for that price, especially, Aston Villa were really interested in him. I think it could be a really good deal. I'm intrigued to see who lines up in the midfield, to be honest, because he's got a fair few options now.
Right, we are next going to go to John. Over to you, John.
Yeah, just talking about our midfield options. Obviously, we had 2 that went out to 2 further players, and they were kind of wing players. Firstly, we'll start with Brian Hill, who obviously only joined the club in the summer for £25 million, plus Eric Lamela, and has now gone back to Spain. This was a move that, personally, I felt he should have had a loan rule within England in terms of settling in. I don't know what you think about that, Ali, and does the player still have a big future at Tottenham?
Honestly, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I can only presume there wasn't the required interest from English clubs. That's all I can presume, because otherwise it makes no sense. It really doesn't. I like Brian Hill a lot. I think he's shown real kind of little moments of what he can bring. He's got a good work rate. He creates. I think when they've put out these messy, mashed up sides in various cup competitions, he's probably been the one player each time that's actually shown something and shown a willingness to kind of break through. I think Conte has clearly come in and looked at him and just thought, are you kind of up for the fight? Are you strong enough? Are you physically strong enough to kind of do what I want you to do? But from everything I'm hearing, they see him as a real big part of the long-term future. He's got a long contract. He's only 20. So their logic, they think, is that get him out to Valencia now, get him 6 months or so of, 4 or 5 months of football. For his development right now, that will serve him better in their mind, they think, than sitting on a bench at Tottenham. Which, yeah, for a 20-year-old, I mean, you know far more about me than me about the development of young players. Of course, minutes helps, but I'm 100% behind your logic of an English club to help his adaptation to England, and the English league would have been so much better, but perhaps there just wasn't that interest there. That's the only reason behind it I can think would be logical.
The other winger I wanted to mention was one that I was very fond of, a player I'd watched a lot over the years, and you will have done as well, Ali, and I'm sure we've been at games together and watched you, and that's Dylan Markandy, who joined Blackburn Rovers on a permanent basis. Now, that was to my great frustration. This was a chap that only in October the club had allowed to do press releases with Yahoo and other associated media, and he'd come out and said he wanted to spend the next 15 years at Tottenham, his boyhood club. And I was very frustrated to see we couldn't do more to involve him and to convince him that his long-term future could be had at Tottenham. Was that kind of a frustrating situation for you, that obviously Mark Andy said, fair enough to him, said, I want to go out and earn my stripes and play first-team football instead of waiting around at Tottenham?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. He's, like you said, he's a player that, especially I'd say the last, probably year, 18 months, is just, his development's been incredible. It's just like a real surge in what he's been doing. Spurs offered him, I'm told, a couple of deals. They kept trying to improve their offer, and maybe fair play to him, I suppose. He went somewhere where he felt he was going to get first-team minutes. I suppose, if I were to play devil's advocate, he's had a few different managers that have looked at him in first-team training and for one reason or another haven't decided to give him more chances. Personally, I'm with you. I'm surprised when we've seen the performances of others that Dylan didn't deserve a shot over some of them. But just for some reason, these managers have just never decided that he was one. I mean, I remember Jose picked him on the bench, didn't he, for a European game, and afterwards was saying very much like he apologised to him that he couldn't bring him on as well. He'd already brought on the other young players. And obviously Nuno gave him, was it about 15 minutes, wasn't it, I think, in the Conference League. It really wasn't long at all. Like I say, devil's advocate, what are they all not, or what are they all seeing, I suppose, that we're not? That maybe there's some deficiency. To be honest, I think he'll go on to be a very good, certainly a Football League player, hopefully more than that. Gutted for him that he picked up that injury. That's just the most horrendous misfortune. It really is. Finally get your move, and in your first game you pick up something like that. It's so rubbish. No, I only hope the best for him. I do. I just hope, I'm sure, there'll be some kind of aspect to it where Spurs financially down the line will benefit from any success he has. But more so, I just hope he has success for himself, because he seems to be a good lad. Everything I've ever heard about him, he's never been like a troublemaker or anything, just a very focused young man who wanted to improve. And hopefully, maybe he might even be in the Premier League with Blackburn next year.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're going to try and up the speed like Adama Traore, and we're going to come on to him very, very shortly as well, Ali. We won't let you go away with that, unfortunately, without talking about Adama, as much as we did love when we last had you on, of course. Your I said the definition, but obviously you gave us what it would be like if you confronted Adama Traore. We will hopefully get that from you one more time. It's probably the last time we can ask you to do that, because we probably will not end up signing him. But then who knows? Spurs, who knows what Spurs will do? Right. We did also sign a creative and versatile attacker in Dejan Kulusevski. I hope I've pronounced that all right. That's been a lot of training. I tell you, there's been a lot of training on that name. Now, obviously, of course, you mentioned on your recent article that he can play on the right or in a central attacking midfield role, as well as up front as an auxiliary striker. I'm intrigued to know from you, do you feel he'll adapt quickly to English football?
I think purely just from using your eyes, I guess, if you look at him and someone like Brian Hill, physically, yes, of course, he looks more suited for the Premier League. He's a big lad. I'm kind of told that speed-wise, he's not the fastest, so he certainly is no Adama Traore. There'll be no need for baby oil, I don't think, with him, or whatever he likes to do. I don't know, but he's interesting. He's like, I've heard people really rave about him. That second loan season with Parma, he was voted. Well, he was given the Young Player of the Year award in Serie A. It was 2019-20. He's a fascinating one. He's still only 21. He's only not too much older than Hill. He's the kind of, I think, for Bentancur for me is the one I can see as a ready-made player to slip into that midfield. For Kulusevski, I think it's going to be a case of that adaptation process. Like I say, physically should maybe make it a little bit quicker for him, hopefully. I think if Conte is to stick with the 3-4-3, the fact that he likes these two number 10s behind the striker, I think Kulusevski fits very nicely into that right-sided one. And I'm intrigued to see what happens with him. I mean, I don't know much about his set-piece taking skills. Perhaps he's the answer to Jamie's question. I don't know.
He could be.
Maybe.
He might well be. Well, given the fact, Ali, as well, that that the club moved for both Adama and Diaz before Kulu, because I can't say it's Kulusevski. I'm not having that. I'll have to go with Kulu.
You're going to need a lot of training on this, Lee.
I'm going with Kulu, mate.
We've got a lot of games coming up, Lee, so you better get that nailed. You better get that nailed, Lee, for the amount of games we've got coming up, mate. Just a heads up.
If you're going to murder a name, I'm going for it. But it does. Do you think that suggests that he was quite far down the list? We've seen his name mentioned in the past and linked to Spurs. However, we'd love to know your thoughts on, was it even possible target before the start of the window that he was linked with us, or is he kind of number 3, number 4? The thing is, we've read and watched, your brilliant self and everyone else talk about Paratici likes to kind of cast the net wide, doesn't he, and have that kind of choice. So, do you think he was far down the pecking order, or is it one that we actually wanted?
I think he's always been on the list. I think Paratici loves him, really does. He was obviously signed him for Juventus in the first place. Now I keep getting told that he's like a massive fan of him. It's an interesting one because there's a part of me that thinks they probably would have tried to sign him as well as Diaz because he's a loan, so it wouldn't have probably impacted the money side of things too much. He plays on the right, whereas Diaz is maybe on the left. Yeah, I mean, obviously Hill has had to make way for him as well. Yeah, I kind of think there were quite strong noises about him right from the start. God knows why they ended up getting him on the final day of the window. That's a whole other thing, and that's Tottenham Hotspur for you. But no, I wonder whether they might have ended up going for both purely because he was on loan. If he was a permanent, I would have said definitely Diaz was the top choice. But I do wonder whether they were maybe looked at as potential, just a bonus addition, and ended up being the only attacking addition.
Ali, just following on from that as well. See, I'm going to ask you two questions in one, but I made you answer the first one before I asked you the second one. See,
nice work.
No Conte stuff there.
Yeah.
But just following on from that, we have got quite a few players, like big signings, if you like, on loan. I mean, a lot of people forget Romero is still actually on loan. So we've got to pay the best part of what, 45 million for Romero in the summer. If Kulu does a business, and that's 18-month loan, but it could rise to 29 million or something like that. There's other aspects of it. Is that a bit of a worry as well? Do you think that we, because us fans, we're just going to forget about that? We're going to be like, oh yeah, that's fine. That was ages ago. But actually, the club's still got to pay for these players.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think people completely have written off the Romero money. It's like it's just he's done. No, honestly, Spurs will make that happen. He would have to be horrendous in this last second half of the season for them not to take that. He is, Conte's so excited about it. Every time he talks about him, he's like how important he is to defence. They're going to build that defence around him for hopefully years to come. It's the plan.
Yeah.
That is money that has to come out. And obviously, does it? In the ideal world, does it balance up with potential options being taken up on Tongi or Gio and people like that in the summer? Maybe that's the way it comes. I'd probably say Gio more than likely than Tongi. Gio's is an interesting one because we know there's an option, but no one can seem to find out how much it is. It's really cloaked in secrecy, that one, for some reason, but we know there's an option there. And obviously with Kulusevski, it becomes an obligation if he plays. I'm not sure if it's appearance-based. It must be appearance-based. It's that classic phrase, it's on sporting condition. So it probably is appearance. And then Galini as well is another one that's on loan. It's going to be an interesting one. They're going to have to get some money into the club in the summer by whatever means, whether it's a cash injection from investors, whether it's those stadium naming rights that I'm actually bored of asking around about because there's just been no bloody progress on them, or to some other means, or selling a player, selling another player. But like you say, there are these fees that we put to one side and forget about.
Yeah, right. We are going to.
Can I just ask one more? I'm really sorry. Block me if you want, but
we might after this, mate. McQueen, go on.
Oh, sorry, buddy. I'm just going to ask quickly about the naming rights. Not have you heard anything, but what's really interesting to me about that is the deals that are out there are amazing. I mean, the Sophie or the SoFi Stadium over in Los Angeles is the $600 million 10-year contract that they've got for that. They're $60 million a year, which is absolutely insane money. I mean, it's a fantastic stadium. They're hosting the Super Bowl this year. I know you went to your NFL, and as am I. My team is actually the LA Rams, so I'm well made up, right? We got to the Champions League final, essentially, the NFL. But I don't know if you saw a post this week on social media. The prices of the tickets for the Super Bowl is absolutely off the chart, like $4,000, 14 grand, 20 grand a ticket. Surely Mr. Levy wants a bit of that at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, didn't he? If you can look at that side of things and tie that in, and surely that's why the club have made it the way they have for these events and so on and so forth, and trickling that money through. Do you not think?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, they've. It's an utterly unique stadium, the Spurs one. It's the only one outside, America that is purpose-built for NFL. It's a Premier League stadium. It's one of the best stadiums in the world. You speak of the SoFi Stadium. That is probably its biggest challenger out there in terms of the greatest stadiums around. And I think that was even more expensive, that stadium. It was, I think, maybe up to $6 billion. There was a lot of money piled into that.
Yep.
Whether Spurs have just been holding out for a deal that they feel befits that kind of stadium, whether the pandemic played a part, I don't know. They've got Todd Klein in, as the chief financial officer, who has a history of sorting out these NFL deals. He did it for the Miami Dolphins stadium. Is it the Hard Rock Stadium, I think it is. So he knows what he's doing. But we're at this stage where, he's brought stuff in. I think that Gettier deal came from stuff he did as well. So he is making an impact.
Yep.
But his naming rights, I mean, my goodness, honestly, it's going to be the bane of my life. It really is. It's just...
One thing,
it could
Ali,
guarantee. The question stadium.
When they announce the naming rights, you will be on holiday, mate.
Probably.
Right. We are, for the sake of Ali and his family and all of us, we are going to go for our final break of the show. For our listeners that are on audio, taking into this break, you're going to hear from a couple of Brighton podcasters that have very kindly given us their thoughts and their prediction ahead of the game at the weekend. We've got the We Are Albion, and of course, we've also got Charlie Haffenden, who rejoins us to give us his thoughts ahead of the game. For watching us on YouTube, there's nearly 1,800 of you watching us live. So thank you so much for that incredible support. For Ali, it's like a normal day in the office. He's just doing a late shift. So Ali, thank you so much. And we are conscious of time, so we are going to try and sum this up we can in the next 10 to 15 minutes. I know people are absolutely loving it. I'm also conscious that you probably got a very early start in the morning. And there's lots going on right now in the world of football and Tottenham. And I presume Ali's putting an article on the way from you about Hitchin at some point tomorrow. So we have to let you get some rest to do that. So we are going to turn and steer the ship, or train in Lee's case, over to Jamie to kickstart the final part of the show. Jamie, over to you.
Yeah, so just a few more on some of the incomings, and maybe the two failed ones. I think I'm going to show here that I haven't learned from Antonio Conte asking two questions in one. But obviously, the two big players that look like they might be on their way to Spurs this summer was Adama Traore and Diaz. So it'd be quite interesting to get your take on kind of why they fell through. Of course, Adama, he looked almost nailed on at one point to be at Spurs. And then, of course, Diaz, there was a huge amount of excitement that we've made this bid. It all looked it was going very well. And then, of course, Liverpool came in. So it'd be very interesting to get your take on why those two deals fell through.
If I'm going to be brutally honest, I think Spurs got played. I think it's as simple as that. I think they really did. I think they had two players they were going for who had very clear preferred clubs they wanted to sign for. Traore going back to his old club. Luis Diaz with Liverpool, who, to be fair, have been interested in him for a long time. It's not like they just suddenly came out of nowhere. And, with Traore, Spurs were very clear. They kept making it very clear in the final month or so that they had not bid for him. They kept making this very clear. So we've had talks, there's been talks, but we've never put in a bid. And I just wonder, with hindsight, whether that was because they felt they probably weren't going to end up actually getting it. And that's because of Barcelona starting to kind of come out of the woodwork to take him over there. With Diaz just, it's mad. I started to get very excited about it because he's a bit different. Obviously we always do the old YouTube compilation of looking at players. With Diaz, you didn't have to do that. You just looked at his goals and assists. Yeah, that's all you had to do. And that summed him up. He's just, Liverpool have got a cracking player there. They really, really have. But Spurs, maybe because of that, there was absolute fury when it all started to go south. I understand they were absolutely pointing fingers at everyone after that happened. But I don't know, maybe I'm just being too simplistic here, but if you've got an agent and a player who want to go to Liverpool, Liverpool would have had talks with this representative about getting him to Liverpool. Would that representative not have kept Liverpool updated on what was happening? I don't think it's any kind of, I don't think you need Hercule Poirot to work out that the leaks that Spurs, I think, were trying to claim they were. The stories came out in Portugal. They didn't come out in the English press. They came out in Portugal. It was kind of I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking at it too simplistically, but I just found that all bewildering. I just think the Spurs went on for too long looking for players that really kind of had their eye elsewhere. And I've had some people say, Spurs have gone in really early in the window, they'd have gone. It's like, well, no, because that would have happened early in the window. I suppose the only maybe way you're looking at, and this is the way no one ever wants Spurs to do it, had they done it in the final hours of the window, maybe they would have snuck it through because Liverpool and Barcelona couldn't have got in there. But I just kind of feel that they were two lost transfers. As excited as I got about Diaz, not Traore, as you know, but Diaz, maybe they're just destined not to happen, and maybe they just wasted too much time on them.
Sorry, Ricky. Just a really quick one on Diaz. Do you find it a little bit strange? Obviously, he's a left winger, and we obviously have a very solid left wing already. I'm not sure whether Diaz is a player that would play as a number 10. So, what was kind of the thinking behind that of maybe perhaps bringing in another left winger?
Tottenham Hotspur for you. I just think it was a. Oh, look at this guy. He's incredible. He's available. Yeah, statement signing. And I think that's what it was. There's no doubt that he would have improved Tottenham as a team. I think probably either Sonny or him would have had to naturally go to the right. Maybe Sonny probably is more naturally able to do that. I think that's all it was. I think he was a player that they just decided. I think everyone in the club did love him. That was what I was told. He was someone they've looked at for a while. But they must have known Liverpool were interested. It's yes. I don't get it. But there you go.
It's man. Over to you, John.
Yeah, a lot has been made with these rumours in Diaz and Traore about the involvement of Jorge Mendes and his sort of role behind it, and Liverpool's then interest in the player. Do you think, Ali, that sort of agents of this nature are causing more harm than good when it comes to attracting players to the club?
It's a difficult one. I think they're helping some circumstances, and I think they're unhelpful in others. I think, especially with Mendes, he seems to be able to have kind of like fingers in every pie, even if they're not his own players. If there's a deal in Portugal, he seems to suddenly emerge as like an intermediary, which, if you believe some reports, caused some of the issues as well. I don't know. I'm struggling to see the good sometimes in it. If you look at some of the deals that, didn't he bring Zitrinkau across to Wolves from Barcelona, and he sent Traore back to Barcelona from Wolves, and the fees are roughly the same, and it's all a bit like, who's helping who here? Are you helping clubs? Are you moving your stable of clients? And I hope personally that Parati's got a good relationship with Mendes. I hope that doesn't define Tottenham's transfers in the future. I think that's probably the way I'd look at it. I'd hope Spurs have more scope than just signing Serie A or Mendes clients. I do, but I know where you're coming from, and certainly it's difficult to see the good it does for the game at times when these kind of massive agents have such a monopoly on things.
Well, it's interesting as well, Ali, because you picked up on the agent thing there from John, but Paratici ended up raiding his old club late on for the club's 2 signings in this window, of course. And you mentioned on your last video that may not speak volumes for the kind of the wide net that we talked about earlier that he kind of casts around. He's meant to be kind of this transfer guru, as it were, that Levy chased for half a decade. How do you see that relationship between him and Levy working out in the long term? Can you see them being here as 10, 11 years like he was at Juventus?
I can only refer to what we said earlier in the show about how long sporting directors last at Spurs. Spurs and Juventus, 2 hugely different clubs. He's been at a club where he could sign Aaron Ramsey for £400,000 a week. He could make mistakes like that almost. The optimist in me, of course, would love to see it being a long-term relationship, and Spurs do brilliantly, and he's able to build some kind of dynasty at Tottenham. Probably the logic within me maybe suggests that having to work within the restraints that you have at Tottenham will be something he hasn't experienced, certainly since I think it was at Sampdoria before Juventus. Maybe that was a more similar thing, but he wasn't like the head man. This is the thing. He's only really been the head guy at Juventus, wasn't he? After, was it Moratti left? In the final years, and obviously this role at Tottenham is a big role. It's even more than sporting director. He is essentially pretty much Daniel Levy's number 2, really, especially in terms of football matters. yeah, I can only point to those who have been before as the evidence of where it could go, and just hopefully he breaks that pattern. You know, Hitchin was there for 5 years or so as a sporting director of type. Maybe perhaps she can beat that.
I promise you, Ali, the interrogation is coming to a close. We are nearly over. For the sake of your family, I promise you. Although I must say, I don't know if you feel the same, this show has absolutely flown by. I don't know about you. It feels like it's gone like that. It feels like it's got like Spurs' window. It's been that amazing with you. And I've got to say, there's still, to have 1,800 people consistently watching this is just, I find it mind-blowing.
Hit the like though, people. Team, you have to hit the like button. Talk to me. Hit the like button. Come on.
There's Ali doing that reference now. I can just imagine Ali doing that thing after we've just failed. Ali, you have to remind me who it was. There's that head in hands moment. I think it was the Conte, wasn't it? Was it Conte after he blew that? Oh, I think it was Conte after he messed it up.
It was when the Conte talks failed, the first time.
You look like that night, you look like all of us had just been through the ringer, and it was like, we're just done, and we're not going back from this.
So fed up of that managerial search, I was.
I must say, after doing these shows of hosting, I just do not want to be doing these shows the man after Conte. Just please don't let me be doing these shows the man after Conte. We often make that joke that Jason McGovern will be taking this show over and it will become a golf podcast. That's the worry where this could be going, but who knows where we're going to go. Right, we are closing the last few questions. Ali, you picked up on your last video that, it was a second successive window where Levy had to take a numerous expensive hit on players and forego the rarely transfer fees that he would never have held out for in the past. The squad, like you said, is down now by 2 players from the window when it started, and that was down to obviously Conte no longer seeing a future for those players. I'm intrigued to know whether you now feel we have got a much more hungrier, determined squad going forward after the close of this window.
I think so. I'd say in terms of personnel, is it a stronger squad? No, because you've lost 2 players. Of course, it can't be stronger in terms of personnel. But I think the big thing for Spurs and Conte, they kind of wanted to almost cleanse the dressing room of these unhappy voices. And that's not to say they were troublemakers, difficult people. It was more the fact that they weren't going to be starting regular matches. They just weren't. The Dele, Gio and Tongi, they weren't in Conte's plans. And even that last game, we saw Harvey White on the bench ahead of all of them. The writing was on the wall. So I think that was the big plan, really, was to try and... I said this in one of the articles I wrote. It's almost like they've had to do a painful rebuild to fix the painful rebuild. It's like they tried to rebuild and they bodged it. It hasn't worked. So they're kind of now having to rip that up and almost start again. And I think while it leaves them with lesser numbers, I do think that's maybe slightly balanced out by the lack of European football. I think that will help. You don't need quite a bigger squad. You can look at it and there's 2 players for every position apart from that ridiculous lack of a second striker. But ultimately, yes, I think that dressing room now is an Antonio Conte dressing room. I think it's players that will put their bodies on the line for him. They'll want to play every single match for him. Even players that didn't go, like, Matt Doherty, let's say, and Emerson Royale, they're now fighting for that right wing back slot. That's really up for grabs. Whoever really puts the next decent cross into the box gets that role pretty much. Is that finally measured, I think, between them. There's some players like Joe Rodon. I think Joe Rodon will rightly feel a little bit peeved. He wanted to have some first team football somewhere, and for one reason or another that didn't happen. There was plenty of offers, but nothing that attracted the club or him. But other than that, I don't get the impression he's the kind of guy that will have a big old whinge and a moan about it. He'll get his head down, which means that squad, it's a squad that he can shape and he can get it doing what he wants to do. And it could be big. People have kind of whinged a little about this window. And I wouldn't say it was a perfect window. I think I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think that's kind of what it is. I think the outgoings are probably the biggest part of it. But I'd say when you look at the teams around them, Spurs have probably maybe made, like I say, that streamlining. They're maybe better set for the second half of the season than the other teams who maybe either not pushed on their squad or have weakened it in a couple of cases.
Let's go over to you, John. We're going to close the show with these final few questions. Over to you, John.
Yeah, Ali, I'll just be really intrigued, and I'm sure our listeners as well, because I can see these names popping up a lot in the questions. Intrigued to know your thoughts on what the futures hold for the likes of Joe Rodon. Obviously, he's only made 78 minutes this year in the Premier League against Palace, no other appearances. Matt Doherty as well, and Japhet Tanganga. And how easy it will be, obviously having been linked away with moves, to mentally, engage them again for the second half of the season, to know they're part of the sort of family set up at Tottenham, and Antonio Conte is going to rely on them if he is. Certainly in Tanganga's case, he's actually made, I think, 19 appearances in all competitions, but certainly less for Rodon and Doherty.
Yeah, to be fair to Conte, he's made it very clear what their roles are. With Joe Rodon, I think it was Mike, I think I asked him about him, and he said this thing about Joe Rodon, for me, plays as the backup to Eric Dyer. That is his role, that central role in the back three. That is where he'll play. It was really unfortunate that when Dyer was out, Rodon was carrying what was told a really painful rib injury. I think we saw against Morecambe, he was really struggling with his movement. They used him in that one, but ultimately they didn't really chance him in the other games. He had Davinson Sanchez really awkwardly sitting in the middle of the pitch, which just didn't work at all. So with Joe Rodon, he kind of needs to know that when Eric Dyer isn't playing, he will play. And if he gets that mentally, that's it. That's all you can ask for. That's your position. Let's be honest. Whatever you used to think of Eric Dyer is now a key player in that defence. He is the guy that is going to be picked as the central player in that back three. So Joe Rodon isn't going to get in it. Japhet, he's just got this thing about him, which he's just a utility man, which he really needs to shed that tag, because I don't think it does him any favours. And I think confidence-wise, we've seen that he's taken a knock recently as well. And he's had a run of 2 or 3 games where he's made some mistakes that normally he's quite composed and he doesn't make those sort of mistakes. So for him, it's about whatever it is, just some moment that gives him confidence again. I'll always go back to that crunching tackle in the Man City match right at the start. When he absolutely, who did he go in? Was it Sterling? I can't remember Sterling. Yeah. And it set the tone for the whole match. So I think he needs another moment like that to get himself back on track. And with Matt Doherty, it's quite simple, really. He needs to set up some goals. I'd say that I actually think his defensive side he's actually improved on. I think he's not too bad there at all. He just needs to almost get back to what he was so good at Wolves, and that's being a wing back, not only slinging crosses into the box, but being at the back post for the crosses that come from the left. If he can do that, honestly, Emerson Royale is nowhere near as bad people make him out to be. He's not, but he's not an attacking wing back. That's his thing. He's 22, very raw. He's going to have to be trained in that side of the game a bit more. But Doherty's got an edge on him on that, and if he can show it, I think he could get more minutes.
Absolutely. We're going to go to Lee, then Jamie, then we're going to close the show. Lee, over to you.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, most people now that have watched and listened to us know that I'm sometimes overly optimistic. But Ali, what do you believe that Tottenham now can generally achieve this season? Is it for you a top 4 finish, a long run in the FA Cup, possibly, you never know, getting to Wembley? But do you think that we are in pole position for that top 4?
Oof. When Conte came in, I kind of was hovering about the 5th spot. That was what I felt was Tottenham's kind of. That would be a big improvement for Tottenham. It would. It would be a leap up the kind of the table really from where they were. Yeah. I'd say if anyone can get Tottenham into the top 4 this season, it's Antonio Conte. Honestly, the stuff I hear about his training sessions, from not only people around the players, but some of the staff involved in everything, it's just, they're incredible. You can see him improving players within the session, just them learning and taking stuff on. And he leaves nothing left to chance. It's all the detail they take on. And what I think will be a huge benefit is not only, obviously, the Conference League would have been a great thing to win. Of course it was. And I'm not doing down any European competition. But just to have those extra midweeks and some of the weeks to work with the players, I think we'll see such a more of a Conte Tottenham the second half of the season. So, yeah, I don't think top 4 is out of the question at all. It's going to be about which of these teams find some consistency. And if you look at Tottenham's results on the Conte in the Premier League, barring the last match, they've been pretty consistent.
Very consistent, yeah.
Why not? That's what I say.
You've got to remember as well, just to add a little bit more of my enthusiasm to it as well, right? we've got 4 games in hand on Chelsea, which is absolutely mind-blowing. I know it's a big if. If we won all them games would actually go above Chelsea. Like, that is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
3 games in hand on West Ham. You know, like you've already said, they ain't done a lot of business. Manchester United, Arsenal ain't done a lot of business. I think if you take what Antonio Conte's done in the first 8-9 weeks of his reign, the first half of the season, we had 5 games lost by Nuno, and he still picked us up. He's still got us 36 points, and he's still got us in that position. I just think that it's ours to lose, in my opinion. It's fascinating hearing yours. Come on, Spurs, we can do it. Especially when you hear that he's ready to train and coach them. I love this stuff.
I love filming on the screen. Cheer up, Lee. Yeah, like Lee Evans cheering up. We're trying to bring him down. Let him cheer him up. Right, let's go, Jamie. Let's go, Jamie. Next, over to you, Jay.
Yep. So obviously Brighton on the weekend. Massive news coming out that Heung-min Son and Christian Romero are back. I think that's going to be such a huge boost for Spurs. And obviously there's always that cliche of like they're going to be like new signings, but Romero has hardly even played under Conte, and he was fantastic in the games before that. So how much of a big boost is that going to be? And also just on Bentancur and Kulusevski, is there any chance they might feature against Brighton?
Bentancur will be a bit close on it when it gets back from international duty. It could be a bit tight for him to start. It's going to be one of those where everyone says, "Oh, what a great transfer window Spurs have had," and the starting 11's got none of the new signings in it. I think that probably will be the case. I wouldn't imagine you'd throw Kulusevski into this match as a starter. I think you're likely to see, Kane, Son, and Lucas up front. But yeah, in terms of Son Romero, it's huge. I mean, Romero, I'd say, especially because, like you say, we just haven't seen much of him, really. And I think he is the game changer in that defence. He's got the potential to be a world-class defender. This is the guy that was Serie A's Defender of the Year last season, in a league that is primed towards defending. And he was the best of that. So he is, if they can, I don't think they want to curb that aggression in him entirely, because you need that, I think, it's especially in the Premier League. But I think he's going to get more yellow cards and potentially red cards. That aside, I think he's going to be huge. Sonny needs to get back to some kind of rhythm. He wasn't really in his stride before the injury. He had this little run of games where he was scoring goals, but maybe wasn't smashing it in terms of the performances. And then I think he dipped slightly more after that. Maybe tiredness. It could be that he was playing every game.
I wonder whether this rest might have, allowed him to have that opportunity to rest. And we saw Lloris suffer that nasty injury, and he came back refreshed. So maybe that.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be. And we know what Sonny can do. He's one of the Premier League's best. And if this is kind of what excites me, I guess, is that we talk about the squad, of course, but if Spurs can just get out their first choice 11, that's an 11 that can cause anyone problems. It really is. He's got to get the balance right. He's kind of removed the creative element from the deeper midfield. There's none of that now. It's going to be very much going to be 2 or 3 guys in the middle that will just say, here's the ball, lads. You 3 go and, cause problems. But, we saw under Mourinho, essentially Kane and Sonny, they were the attack. They were just incredible by themselves. So we know they can do it. And then you shove another third player in. Who knows? It could be Lucas, maybe Bergwijn. Bergwijn was terrific against Leicester coming off the bench. He was, I thought, one of the best players against Chelsea as well. If he can go on a bit of a run himself with the confidence from the fact that Conte said, don't sell him, I can count on him. I like him a lot. Who knows? He could be the kind of unexpected star of the second half of this season. You never know. Yeah.
Ali, we're pleased to know this is the final question. I have to almost apologise that we've kept you for as long as we have. We did say to you off it could be a long one, but I didn't expect it to be this long. I know Lee laughs and jokes that these are normally 2 hours, but I wasn't going to do that to you. So firstly, thank you so much for all your time that you've given us. We greatly appreciate it. We love as well, having you on. We know it's obviously sparingly we get you on once every 3 or 4 months. We always love having you on. Again, it's representing so much love from the listeners that there's been for you tonight. And last couple of questions from me. So the first one for me is that do you believe Antonio Conte will be here for the length of his contract and beyond that? Firstly, that's a yes or no. How you want to phrase that? Up to you.
Depends on the summer.
There you go. Ali Gold leaves on a cliffhanger. Who would have thought it? Right, okay. And then the final one, we've got Brighton obviously at the weekend. FA Cup, I think a lot of us are going there on Saturday night. It's going to be a really big game, of course, for the club. We are duly bound. We're going to go round as well. Ali, can we get a prediction for you from that one?
2-1 Spurs.
There you go. 2-1 Spurs. Right, okay, let's go round. Then we're going to close it. Lee, prediction for Brighton, please.
I'm copying Ali. 2-1 Tottenham.
Okay, John, prediction for Brighton.
1-0 Tottenham.
Nervy game at the lane. Right, and over to you, Jay.
I'm going to go for a 3-1 Spurs win. I've said 2-1 earlier, but that'd be boring. So everyone said that's like 3-1 Spurs. Comfortable
Okay,
win.
there you go. Lovely. Right. I'm going to go for. I mean, listen, I'm taking my wife. I'm taking my wife with me to this game.
I know you've got to get a win for Naz. Yeah, 100%.
So we're going to have to go for a 3-1 Spurs win. Shelley loves it when we go. Can you believe it? Not interested in the TV. Only when we go. There you go. Always the way. Right. Okay. I must say, very quick shout outs. John, of course. John runs a wonderful podcast over at Lilywhite Rose. John, where can we find that pod very quickly? Just give us a.
All major podcast providers at Lilywhite_Rose.
Amazing, perfect, and of course we've got Jamie who keeps us inundated with the transfer window. Jamie, where can we find, and of course all the latest content on Spurs now? It's not just transfers anymore; it's lots of club team news. Jamie, where can we find the content?
Yeah, I mean, look, my Twitter handle's just there. I mean, if you want to follow it, then go for it. But no, yeah, that's where you can follow me, Daily Hotspur.
What an unshameful plug that was from Jamie Brown. If you want to follow, no plug in there. I know one man that will be plugging. That's Lee McQueen. Lee, very quickly to you.
I love a plug. Like this episode because it's absolutely amazing show with Alasdair Gold. Absolutely phenomenal panel. But I have got a new little podcast out myself called In the Line of Hire. It's reviewing all the Apprentice shows every single week. All winners, by the way, all ex-winners that are coming onto the show, finalists coming onto the show. Got a great lineup throughout the rest of the week, this week and beyond. And you can just follow me on Twitter, and if you follow me, you'll get all the details. In the Line of Hire. It's really, really cool. So if you hate The Apprentice, do not bother downloading it. It is all about The Apprentice.
Who would have guessed, eh? Who would have guessed? The wonderful Lee McQueen. He's back with us at the weekend as well. And finally, the man tonight who's given us so much of his time and always love having him on. Ali, tell us where we can't find you, because where can we listen? No, honestly, really, where can?
Yeah.
Have we got
You're going to see
TikTok
my
yet, Ali?
stupid face or hear my voice somewhere.
Can you tell us, Ali, very quick? No, listen, lovely having you on. For anyone that doesn't know where to find you, I don't know how that's the case. Where can we find you, Ali? Please tell us. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, well, you can find my articles on football.london. You can find this stupid face on YouTube. You can hear my voice on the Golden Guest Talk Tottenham each week on the podcast as well. So, yeah, I'm there. I'm around.
Ali, we've absolutely loved it. Look, over 2 hours. As Vincent says here, absolute pure gold. Ali, thank you so much for all your time. We're going to hopefully, like I say, touch base with you in the summer. If you haven't after this, blocked us all and never come back for the amount of time we've taken you. We've gone into what we would call, obviously, definitely transfer window stoppage time. So for Ali's sake, we're going to close it there. From Lee McQueen, from John from Lilywhite Rose, from Jamie Brown, from myself, from the wonderful Ali Gold. We are back with you on Sunday, hopefully seeing Spurs and reviewing Spurs advancing the FA Cup. From all of us here, please keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on, you Spurs.